Good morning, Year 5. Happy Wednesday. Today we are doing the big question a little earlier than usual this week. But before we go into the big question, we are going to have a look at our do now for today. And our do now for today, as you may have seen from the home learning sheet, is slightly different, but I will explain it to you right now. So, we're on day 3 of our reading, our final day this week due to RE Day and Inset Day. But this do now is giving you the opportunity to put these words into context, into practice, as you've encountered them a number of times now. And as you can see what I've written here at the top of your do now that you've seen the following words in a number of different contexts and have encountered them throughout the text, have a go at putting them into your own sentences. So on Monday you spent quite a bit of time studying these words, looking at their definitions and putting them into sentences that made sense. Then yesterday, as we read through the text, we stopped at a lot of these different words and explained them in context, explained what they meant and how they affected the meaning of the text and the meaning of different sentences. So, for that reason, you are now going to have a go at putting each of these 8 words into their very own sentences. Now, if you need to go back and look at the work you did previously on Monday especially, then do, if you need to refresh your mind. Otherwise, you should be able to have a go at this, and I really do look forward to seeing what you come up with on Seesaw, as this is quite a different do now, whereas normally we have set answers. This is really open to you to be able to create your own creative sentences using these words in context. So, pause the video here, and then unpause when you're ready to get going with our big question. Okay, excellent. And like I said a moment ago, I really do look forward to seeing all your work on Seesaw, especially this do now, as it is something slightly different. So, let's have a look at the big question before we get reading so that we can have this in the back of our mind as we go. So, the big question on the 10th of the 2nd, 21 is, based on pages 16 to 18, how do you know that life was difficult for Lewis and Clark and their men in 1804? So, what that question means is, in 1804, Lewis and Clark were travelling across North America. They encountered difficulties, but how do we know that this life was difficult for them? So, based on those pages especially, now we will read throughout the entire text, but we will really focus on those pages 16 to 18. How do we know that Lewis and Clark and their men had a difficult time in 1804. Now, as always, as it's a big question, I've written here, support your answer with at least 2 pieces of evidence from the text. So, you are going to have to pause the video here, write your date and your big question, and then unpause again when you're ready to get going with the text. Okay, so I have that question in the back of my mind as I read. Now, you're going to help me read again today, doing a little bit, and I'll do a little bit too. And when we come to page 16 to 18, we're really going to focus on that question that is in the back of our mind as we go. Okay, so Bear Grylls' epic expeditions. We live on a magnificent planet with so much to see. Since I was a child, I've always felt the pull of the wild. I've been lucky enough to have had the opportunity to go on some amazing adventures in some fantastic parts of the world, often to very remote places where only a few human beings have ventured before. On my adventures, I have followed in the footsteps of some epic explorers who led expeditions into the wildest and most remote parts of the world for the first time in history, blazing a trail that future adventurers like me have followed. When you're going into the wild, preparation is essential. I will spend months training for big expeditions to make sure I have the essential skills to stay safe. Okay, and you're just going to read the little box up here. Okay, pause the video here, off you go, read that little box. Okay, and I will continue with protecting our planet. While exploring the world is an amazing experience, it is also a great privilege that comes with important responsibility. Human beings are some of the most destructive animals in the world and are destroying rainforests and endangering animals. Remember, endangering, that you've learned from your outdoor learning, means you're putting animals in danger due to our destructive or chaotic nature. We are animals too. If we want to continue going on epic expeditions like the ones in this book, it is vital that we look after our planet making sure we leave everything as we find it and respect the natural world as much as possible. So Bear really sets the scene here that there's so many adventures that have taken place that he will discuss throughout the book, but if they are to continue taking place, then we must look after our planet if we want those epic adventures to continue. Okay, now we approach page 16. So the question, the big question about how do we know that life was difficult for Lewis and Clark and their men in 1804 comes back into my head. Okay, I really need to think about this question now, looking for evidence as I read. So, again, you're going to help me read, so you're going to pause the video here and you're going to look at this box on this page, on page 16, and you're going to read from when down to extreme. So pause the video here and read the little box up at the picture. Okay, well done. Now, was there anything there that you found that could have been useful? I didn't think so. I don't think it shows really how difficult it was for them. If you did find something you want to underline it and keep it for later, then that's fine. Okay, we're going to continue reading across the plains. Through the spring, summer and autumn of 1804, the course of discovery travelled up the Missouri River. While most of the men rowed or pulled the boats, others hunted for deer, duck and geese. Most days, Lewis walked along the shore with Seaman, his dog, making observations of animals and birds, and making notes that he later used when drawing maps. In August, one of the men, Sergeant Charles Floyd, fell ill and died. Okay, potentially you want to underline that or make a note of it. If you're reading alongside on your own text, then you might want to stop the video here and underline that if you want to show that that proves that life was difficult. Or if you're not reading along with the printed version, you have a copybook in front of you, you can make notes as we go. Okay, I'm not going to use that one. I'm going to save something else for later. But yes, you could argue that. He was buried beside the Missouri River, and a nearby stream was named the Floyd River in his honour. The explorers then continued north through the lands of various Native American peoples, including the Yankton, Arikara, and Teton Sioux. With the weather growing colder, they decided to halt in the territory of the Mandan Indians and build a fort where they could spend the winter. Okay, I'm going to stop reading here and I am going to underline that. Okay, the cold weather was so extreme they had to stop and build a fort. Okay, that proves life was difficult. May not be the best example, but it's one example that I have now taken down, and when I find better ones, I'll be able to ignore this one. But for now, that could be something I can come back to. So I can just write a note that maybe my point will be harsh weather, and then I could come back and then use this quote later on. Okay, let's continue, see if we can find more or better evidence. 17. Among the Mandan. The Mandan lived in large earth lodges, each housing 20 or more people, and raised crops and hunted buffalo. They were friendly and encouraged the explorers to stay. Their village served as a major marketplace for other Native Americans, as well as French and British traders, so they were used to visitors. Bear says, as the expedition moved west, they had increasingly frequent and frightening encounters with grizzly bears, which the men had never seen before. Lewis was chased 73 metres by a bear weighing more than 136 kilograms. Okay, so maybe there, that could be another point. Dangerous or frightening encounters with grizzly bears. They had never seen before, that would have been a shock to them. And there Lewis was chased by 73 metres by a bear. That really is good evidence to show that life was dangerous and difficult for them. Okay, I may not use that, but again, it's another option for me to use in my answer. Okay, let's continue. At Fort Mandan, Lewis and Clark hired a French-Canadian trader, Toussaint Charbonneau, as a guide, mainly because his pregnant wife, Sacagawea, was a Shoshone Native American from the Rocky Mountains, and they knew she would be helpful there. So we've read 16 and 17, we have some evidence. The question says 16 to 18, so that might suggest there is better evidence on page 18. Over the Rockies. Strong currents and winds made progress slow. The men buried some equipment to use on their way back, which made the boats lighter. Okay, maybe another piece of evidence here. Again, linking to the weather. Okay, potentially could use that later on. But in mid-June, they encountered a series of huge waterfalls, today known as Great Falls, and violent storms, which together delayed them by nearly a month. Okay, again, weather, difficult weather conditions, just like the strong currents and winds, just like the cold winter. Again, you could really build a whole answer around weather if you wanted. Huge waterfalls and violent storms, which together delayed them by nearly a month. Okay, that shows life was difficult. Their journey was stopped by a month. Okay, that is a long, long time not to be able to continue with something. They then entered a range of mountains higher than any they had ever seen, the Rocky Mountains, at a place now called the Three Forks. Three rivers met to form the Missouri. They followed the right-hand fork west, but soon realized that they would need horses and local knowledge to get across the mountains. They knew the Shoshone tribe could help, but frustratingly could not find them. Okay, more difficulty here. This shows that life was difficult too. They realized that they would need horses and local knowledge to get across the mountains. Okay, again, life was difficult there. They don't have the transport, they don't have the knowledge to continue on. So that proves that life was difficult. Finally, on the 13th of August, Lewis located a Shoshone war party and with Sacagawe's help obtained horses and guides who led the corps over the rest of the ranges. Okay, I've now read pages 16 to 18. I've gathered lots of evidence and I can begin constructing an answer based on this evidence very shortly. However, before we do that, I would just like to finish the text, just to finish it out, and you can help me by reading this section here, from Beyond the Three Forks down to Territory. So pause the video here and just have another go at reading, practicing your fluency and your self-correction. Okay, fantastic, and I'll finish it out. Heading west from Great Falls, the corps skirted, oh dear, I better self-correct myself. Heading west from Great Falls, the corps skirted the highest peaks by following the Jefferson River, crossing Lemmy Pass, and then heading north up the Bitterroot Valley. So remember, our word was skirted, means to go around or to avoid. But from Traveller's Rest, they had to climb over the rugged Bitterroot Mountains. As we can see here, they're rugged, they're extremely high peaks that would have been difficult to climb. Okay, so back to our question. The big question, based on pages 16 to 18, how do you know that life was difficult for Lewis and Clark and their men in 1804? Based on pages 16 to 18, I have found evidence on 16 to 18. I now must construct points, use evidence to support, and then explain. So I'm going to model an answer, and then you will be able to go and do your own. Now it is very important that you stay with this video to watch the model answer, as it is very clear when you upload to Seesaw who has and who has not watched the model answer, because the people that have created some excellent pieces, and I'm really excited to see what they produce again today. So I'm going to start my answer by using the question as always to help me with my opening line. But this is not really an opinion question, so I can't start with my opinion as we often do. So that is something that really wouldn't make sense in this context. So I'm going to start by saying, there is no doubt, because there is no doubt that life was difficult for them. That Lewis and Clark had a difficult time alongside their men in 1804. Okay, that's the way to start. That's an opening. I can now go into my first point, which I am going to choose. I chose the weather conditions as my first point, as there was lots of evidence to help me with that. So, skip 2 lines. We know that weather conditions were extremely difficult as it says on page 18, and then I can quote, so that's my point made. Now I quote. So I go to page 18 and I find my quote. But in mid-June, they encountered a series of huge waterfalls means I can skip a few words in the quote that I don't need. And violent storms. That ellipsis helps me to move on. Which together delayed them by nearly a month. So there's my point, there's my quote. Now, just to explain it. So this shows that the weather made life extremely difficult for these men. So I've used a point, I've used a quote, and I've explained it. I will now pink what I should pink for my first point. Remember, we're not finished yet. We need to go and do a second point to ensure we get full marks. So my point was about the weather conditions. That's essentially my point. Then I gave a quote to support my point about the weather conditions. And finally, the weather made life extremely difficult for these men. Okay, that is how it is explained. I will skip 2 lines and go on to my second point. Oh, one more thing. Just to remind myself, point, evidence, explain. P-E-E. Okay, skip 2 lines. Next point. Also, just using a nice simple connective, life was challenging. It's just using a synonym of difficult. As they didn't know. Skip a line, skip a page. So they didn't know the territory. Okay, using one of my words of the week. They were in. Nor have the resources they needed. So, there's my point. First point was about weather. Second point is about not having the knowledge of where they are or all the equipment they needed to help them. I now need a quote to support that point. Again, use ellipses to help me shorten the quote and just get the key information in. Realised they would need horses, and local knowledge to get across the mountains. Okay, end of my quote, and then explain it once again. Just to round it up, the answer, this suggests life was challenging, and the group as a collective were known as the Corps of Discovery, so I can use that. It was challenging for the Corps of Discovery in 1804. Okay, let's just look at my second point to make sure I have used PEE. My point was that life was difficult as they didn't know. Okay, I'm going to have to go back and go up here. The territory or have the resources they needed. The quote then is about the horses and the local knowledge that they were missing. So there's my point, my evidence and my explanation saying life was challenging in 1804 as the question asked. So I have done point, evidence explained times 2 to ensure I get full marks. Please, please, please make sure you include an explanation at the end and that you have 2 pieces of evidence. Evidence means a quote, really important. So that's been modelled. Hopefully you have enough evidence from the text that I've gathered or that you have gathered yourself, and you're now ready to go and answer your own big question before uploading to CISO this afternoon. Okay, thank you so much for your time, thank you for watching, and I will see you very soon. Bye.